Revenge with Karen.
I knew they'd never say my name on stage. Hell, I knew it the second they started calling the product ours when it was just mine and a Google Doc at 2 a.m. Lit by the glow of leftover pad thai and the crushing realization that I'd made something real and handed it over like a fool. Flash forward 2 years, and there's the founder, all teeth and LinkedIn buzzwords, calling it a once-in-a-generation platform during some overpriced offsite. Same platform built off a skeleton I'd written while dealing with a sinus infection, a dead modem, and a bottle of off-brand NY The demo screen behind him was my architecture, the animated flowcharts, my sequences, and the part where the system predictively restructured cross-tenant data flows. That was just my comment. Try not to let this crash the whole damn database again. But I smiled anyway. That's what I was paid for, smiling, fixing, being forgotten. The intern who couldn't find the bathroom came to me for help. The senior devs forwarded me bugs they didn't understand. Half of engineering treated me like a Stack Overflow genie. I gave answers. I cleaned up messes. I didn't ask for parade, except maybe I did. Maybe I wanted someone, just one damn person, to say, she built this. But it was always the same. My commits buried under a dozen names, Slack messages forwarded without attribution, my prototypes rebranded by some fresh-hired product manager who thought Agile meant adding emojis to deadlines. And when those slide decks got made, my work became legacy code, like I was already dead. By the way, if you've made it this far and you like stories where quiet people get very loud in legally binding ways, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like this story. 95% of listeners don't, and honestly, it means a lot to the team keeping this twisted little circus alive. Anyway, the final straw wasn't a big betrayal. It never is. It was a Wednesday. An intern, sweet kid, asked if I could explain why the authentication layer was failing in Sandbox. I pulled up the logs. Some principal engineer had overwritten my routing protocols. Badly. Like, crashed the client session badly. I fixed it. Quietly, again. 2 hours later, that same engineer posted in the main Slack channel that he'd cleaned up the outdated logic, and now everything was working. 37 likes. The CTO commented, "Love seeing initiative from the new team." My name, not even a whisper. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a lukewarm burrito and reread my old design notes. My original diagrams, my timelines, my Git repos, all dated, all documented. It was supposed to be internal scaffolding, temporary, but they had taken that scaffolding and built their cathedral on top of it, then set my name on fire. I didn't cry. That phase was long gone. I just opened a new tab, searched provisional patent application. Read, clicked, registered, and started documenting. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I wasn't even trying to be vengeful. I just wanted to own what I built, because apparently no one else thought I did. And if they weren't going to give me credit, I'd take it another way, one that came with filing dates, legal protections, and cease-and-desist letters with my damn name at the top. At work, nothing changed. On the surface, I kept mentoring. I kept building. I kept smiling at people who couldn't explain the difference between a class and an instance but made twice my salary. They called me reliable, quiet genius, the engine that keeps this place running. Engines break when you stop maintaining them. They didn't know that yet. They just kept driving. And I let them, because I was building something else now, something they couldn't touch. And I had all the receipts. I should have known she'd come in swinging. New HR director, fresh from some transformative leadership seminar, strutting through the office in click-clack heels like she was auditioning to be the villain in someone else's origin story. She loved phrases like cultural realignment, non-compliant workflows, my personal favorite, intellectual property integrity. That last one always made her eyes gleam, like she thought she was about to uncover a secret lab full of stolen robots. At first, I ignored her. I'd seen plenty like her come and go, performative to the bone, obsessed with headlines and handbooks, trying to make a name for themselves by tightening the screws on the people actually holding the place together. She had something the others didn't, buy-in from someone higher up. I don't know who. It could have been the founder, the legal team, maybe even the CTO who'd gotten real twitchy since I stopped attending strategy meetings. But suddenly, she had teeth. It started subtle. Random emails about device compliance. A few vague Slack messages reminding staff that after-hours access to dev environments must be pre-cleared. Then came the survey, HR initiative to assess workflow vulnerabilities. Cloaked in positivity, but the questions were surgical. Who has access to what? When? Why? Then the meeting request. I walked in, sat down across from her and one of the junior legal guys, barely old enough to shave, clutching a folder like it was a hostage negotiation. She didn't even wait for me to get my water. Just said it, flat and rehearsed. We have screenshots. I blinked. Of you accessing a restricted development environment from a personal device. Ah, there it was. The room went quiet in that smug HR way, like they expected me to start groveling or confessing to corporate espionage. I didn't blink. I just leaned back and let her keep digging. She slid the screenshots across the table like some kind of CSI reveal. Low-res images of terminal windows. My username. Timestamps. One showed me logged into a test server from home around midnight on a Saturday. Another had a git commit tagged with a personal email. Not deployed, not published, just there. They waited for me to panic. Instead, I picked up the screenshots, scanned them slowly, set them down. Thanks, I said. That seemed to confuse her. She shifted in her chair. You realize this is a clear violation of our IP policy? I said, noncommittal. Is that the same IP policy that hasn't been updated since 2017? Or the one legal redlined but never finalized? Her jaw twitched. Junior legal opened his mouth, then closed it. Look, I wasn't stupid. I knew what they were trying to do. Build a paper trail. Paint me as the noncompliant one. The risk, the liability. All while sitting on a goldmine of work I had architected with zero formal recognition. No invention assignment agreements, no copyright filings. Just the assumption that anything I touched belonged to them. But here's the thing about assumptions. They don't hold up in court. I wasn't working on a competing product. I was documenting my own damn brain. I was formalizing the work they never cared to attribute, because someday I knew they'd come for me. And when they did, I wanted them to come with screenshotted proof, because proof is a two-way street. You're not denying the activity? She asked. Eyes narrow. Not at all, I said. I like to think clearly after hours. Quieter that way, she sniffed. You're aware that this could constitute grounds for termination. Sure, I said. Just make sure you include all the dates and signatures. Her mouth tightened. She closed the folder. We'll be in touch. I walked out like I'd just filed a status report. What they didn't know was that every screenshot they printed out in that little conference room, I had already filed them. Context, with dates, with source code hash trails, all tied neatly to provisional patents bearing my name and timestamped by the USPTO. Because when you're an architect, you don't panic when they inspect the scaffolding, you smile, because you know the foundation's already yours. And I was done letting them live rent-free in it. I didn't defend myself, not once. Let them think what they wanted, that I was moonlighting for a competitor, cooking up a rival product in the shadows, that I was some rogue engineer, siphoning off secrets through the vents like a Bond villain in yoga pants. The truth was way more boring and infinitely more dangerous. I wasn't working on someone else's project. I was formalizing mine, and the only reason I could do that legally, because they never bothered to write me into the ownership paperwork. Not once in 4 years did anyone ask me to sign an invention assignment agreement. No clause in my onboarding packet. No retroactive form. Nothing. I could have handed over the source code to a startup in Belize and no one could have touched me because they never owned what they never claimed. They were too busy basking in their own reflections. So yeah, I let them run with their fantasy. Let them cast me as the villain while they printed off blurry screenshots like they'd caught Snowden in the server room. Meanwhile, it was 6 months into a quiet little process that started with a coffee-stained notepad and ended with a string of USPTO submissions flagged under examination. Provisional patents for every key component they now used in production. Algorithms, systems design, even a few architecture schemas they'd mistakenly labeled open source. Spoiler, they weren't. The system they loved, the one they called Delta, I'd built its spine. And now I was slowly, methodically, making that spine mine again. So when the email came, subject line, immediate termination, I didn't scream. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't post some vague inspirational quote about closed doors leading to better windows. I just stood up, walked into HR, and accepted the folder. She handed it to me with all the forced empathy of a flight attendant during a crash landing. We're very sorry it came to this, she said, voice like cold oatmeal. Sure, I replied. Curiosity, who signed this? She blinked. Excuse me? "This document," I said, flipping to the last page. "Who reviewed and authorized it? Legal founder you?" There was a pause, that beautiful, awkward pause. "I believe it was cross-reviewed internally," she said finally. "Why?" "No reason," I said, and slipped the paper into my tote like it was a receipt for groceries. Back at my apartment, I laid the termination letter beside my patent filings. Stamped. Signed. Time-stamped. Their version of the story said I was terminated for unauthorized work on a competing platform. My version said I was terminated after independently formalizing unassigned intellectual property. One of those holds up better in front of an IP judge. Guess which? I wasn't after money. Not then. I wasn't even after revenge. I just wanted acknowledgement. Ownership. Something they denied me every time they slapped someone else's name on my architecture diagrams or pitched my back-end structure as a team achievement. They wanted to erase me. Fine, but you can't erase what you never owned in the first place. And now I had everything I needed: dates, names, signatures. Their official reasoning, their false assumptions, and best of all, their overconfidence. They thought they were killing a liability. What they really did was sign away their foundation. I had the paperwork to prove it. They made a whole spectacle out of it. My termination, I mean. You'd think I got caught keylogging the finance team or running some underground crypto farm in the janitor's closet the way they paraded it around. Internal email blast. Slack memo from the founder. All wrapped in vague HREs about restructuring for long-term sustainability and refocusing on core values and compliance. Kind of corporate poetry that sounds like it came out of a blender full of LinkedIn posts and unpaid PR interns. The CTO even held a town hall. Didn't say my name, of course. Would have humanized me too much, but everyone knew. He used phrases like we had to make some tough decisions regarding certain personnel, and we identified internal behaviors that posed long-term risk. Then came the zinger. We've mitigated those risks accordingly. Mitigated, like I was a bad server patch or a leaking faucet. Someone even told me he made a joke about cleaning house. That one stung a little, only because I was the one who built the damn house, painted the walls, and fixed the plumbing every time some product clown set it on fire with an ill-timed rollout. But whatever, let them dance. I stayed quiet, just like I always had, except this time I watched. And that's when they slipped up. A week later, hosted a live-streamed product demo. Their big Q3 rollout, a rebranding of our core system, Delta 2.0, complete with redesigned UI, updated performance benchmarks, and a bunch of polished nonsense about machine intelligence integration. All fluff, but the back end, that was the part I cared about. I opened a browser, pulled up the live stream, and within 10 minutes, I counted 17 elements I'd included in my provisional filings. A predictive caching mechanism that was mine. A conditional API fallback system that hadn't even existed until I prototyped it over a Thanksgiving break while my turkey defrosted in the sink. A new resource allocation tree that I'd diagrammed on a napkin during a meeting where the product team argued for 30 minutes about font sizes. Every piece of it still humming like I left it. No attribution, no changes. Just renamed and rolled out like they'd birthed it from scratch. One of the devs even demoed a feature called Smart Reconnect Logic, which I had once, in a fit of snark, referred to in Jira as lazy reconnect for fragile babies. I almost spit out my coffee. The kicker, they doubled down on the narrative. CEO posted on LinkedIn the next day, "We remain committed to protecting the integrity of our IP, even when hard decisions must be made. Delta 2.0 is just the beginning. IP integrity. That one got me. I screenshotted the post, added it to the folder. At this point, it was almost funny. They'd fired me for supposedly compromising the product and then had the gall to ship my architecture as the foundation of their new flagship update. Publicly. Brazenly. Like I was some ghost in the machine who'd never existed. And the best part, we're selling it to investors as proprietary tech, which meant every slide deck, every recorded pitch, every brochure was now walking proof of unauthorized use of patent-pending systems tied directly to me. They'd taken my silence for surrender. What they didn't know was that I hadn't stopped working. I just stopped working for them. I wasn't angry anymore. Honestly, it was kind of beautiful, watching them cheerfully accelerate toward a wall they didn't know was there. Proud, oblivious, celebrating their theft in high definition. I didn't have to lift a finger. They were building the case for me. The first cut came quiet. A single email, not to the company, to the investors. Specifically, to the managing partner of their Series B round, the same guy who'd bragged about how Delta was the future of smart predictive infrastructure during his keynote at a conference in Miami, wearing $1,000 loafers and quoting innovation like it was scripture. Subject line: Inquiry regarding potential IP conflict Delta 2.0. The body was short. Clinical, but devastating. We believe you are currently utilizing intellectual property protected under pending U.S. patents filed by my full legal name. The technologies in question are documented in the following provisional filings. List of patent numbers. Request confirmation of licensing arrangements and attribution. Please refer to the attached materials. Attached were screenshots of their screenshots, the same ones HR had shoved in my face during that disciplinary meeting, except now they had timestamps, metadata, and source trace trails linking them directly to my architecture. Each file was labeled in neat legalese. Exhibit A, Original Dev Environment Log Personal Device Access. Exhibit B, Delta 2.0 Public Demo Feature Comparison Matrix. Exhibit C, Internal Termination Memo Cited Grounds vs. Registered Claims. They even included the termination letter. Highlighted the part where they accused me of working on a competing product. The brilliance of it was in the restraint. No threats, no demands, just the quiet implication that maybe, just maybe, the product their millions were riding on wasn't as clean as they'd been led to believe. I wasn't copied on any replies, obviously, but I didn't need to be, because 48 hours later, the founder's tone shifted. Gone were the victory laps and inspirational posts. Instead, silence. No LinkedIn updates, no Slack cheerleading. The town hall was postponed. Twice. Then came the whispers. A friend of mine, still inside, still loyal, sent me a message. Legal is freaking out. Investors asked for full IP chain of ownership documentation. We don't have it. No, they didn't. Because they never made one. Because no one ever thought the quiet girl in the corner, writing the hard parts, would also be the one who trademarked the blueprint out from under them. I was at a cafe when I got that message. Raining outside, jazz on the speakers. I remember sipping my tea and thinking, this is what it feels like when paper cuts draw blood. Not a war, not a lawsuit, not a dramatic courtroom battle. Just filings, screenshots, legal notices, delivered in PDF. My attorney called it a conversation starter. I called it the first time in years I felt like I could breathe without swallowing my own resentment. I had spent so long biting my tongue, watching other people polish my work into trophies for themselves. And now they were scrambling to answer for something they couldn't fix with a PR firm or a Slack emoji reaction. My friend's next message sealed it. They pulled the DevOps team into an emergency audit. They're trying to find a version of Delta without your fingerprints. Good luck with that. Every layer, every failover mechanism, every logical pivot in that codebase, it was mine. Even their own documentation still used my naming conventions. Some internal scripts still had my comments in them. Fix this before demo was one of them. Timestamped, linked to my GitHub, and now filed with the USPTO. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not really. It was about reminding them that ownership isn't about who speaks the loudest in meetings or who gets quoted in TechCrunch. It's about who kept the receipts. And I had every single one. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the eerie kind, like the air right before a power outage. Demo builds stopped appearing in the repo. The usual ping-pong of Jira comments dried up. Sprint planning got postponed until further notice, and the engineering Slack channels, which used to buzz like a hive of overcaffeinated bees, went flatline. Then the whispers started again. This time louder. This time nervous. Product testing was halted pending review. The next rollout, canceled. Legal told engineering to pause all commits tied to the Delta framework. Overnight, their velocity chart looked like a nosedive. They tried to dress it up with a new internal term, IP hygiene sprint, but everyone knew what it meant. They were gutting the codebase. Looking for rot, looking for me. Then I got the message. It was from a junior dev I'd mentored back in the early days. Sweet kid, smart, green as a spring onion. Never the office politics type, just pure code. Hey, did you really file patents? I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone, thought about giving a vague reply, then changed my mind. I just wrote, check the USPTO site, use my name. 3 minutes later, he replied with a single emoji. Flushed face by the next morning, I'd gotten 10 more messages, some from people I liked. Some from people who had, let's say, benefited from my silence. One of them even wrote, "You're a savage." I didn't respond. Not because I was being cold. I just didn't feel savage. I felt right. Like I'd finally walked out of a fog I didn't even know I was in. Then came the leak. I don't know who did it. Maybe someone in legal trying to play defense. Maybe that same junior dev, shaken by what he found. But someone tipped off a well-known tech blog, the kind that feeds on startup drama like sharks in a kiddie pool. Headline hit that afternoon. Delta's core framework tied to unlicensed patents filed by former engineer. And just like that, the whispers became sirens. The article included links to my provisional filings, excerpts from the termination letter, screenshots from the Delta 2.0 demo lined up, side by side, with descriptions from my patent claims. One paragraph even quoted the founder's now-deleted LinkedIn post about IP integrity, followed by the sentence, "It appears that integrity was never properly documented." Brutal, beautiful, the story exploded. Hacker News, Reddit, Twitter. Everyone suddenly had an opinion. Some praised me, some called me petty. Some legal tech nerds even started a thread dissecting each of my filings line by line, speculating on enforcement and ownership. But the real fallout hit internally. I heard through the grapevine that the founder canceled 3 investor meetings in 24 hours, that legal had gone into containment mode, that HR deleted their Slack memo about my termination, like that was going to unhappen it. And that's when I knew it wasn't just me reclaiming power. It was them realizing they'd built their empire on a foundation they didn't actually own, and now it was cracking. I didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't even call anyone. Instead, I did what I always did. I sat at my desk, opened a terminal, wrote clean, modular code for something new. No more borrowed tools, no more borrowed time. Just my voice, my system, my name, and this time, they'd have to ask to use it. The cease-and-desist letters dropped like hammers. Not in some dramatic courtroom showdown, not with gavels and gasps, but in inboxes, time-stamped, certified, stacked with enough legal weight to give every exec acid reflux before lunch. They came from my attorney's IP firm, clean, brutal, surgical. Subject lines like notice of IP infringement, patent filings 17/914 XXX through 17/915 XXX. Every line read like a heartbeat, slowing to a stop, are hereby instructed, pending resolution of ownership. Continued use may constitute willful infringement. They didn't just target the company. Oh no, this wasn't a warning shot across the bow. This was coordinated. Engineering leads, product owners, DevOps managers, even the client delivery team. Anyone who touched the Delta 2.0 modules built on my architecture got their own copy. Personalized, specific, annotated with feature names and lines of code, still echoing my naming conventions. Smart fail recover, adaptive scaling node, deferred session handler, functions I wrote in sweatpants with a sinus infection, now weaponized like landmines under their flagship product. And it worked. Almost immediately, internal modules got yanked offline. Revenue dashboards plummeted. Clients started emailing things like, "Hey, why is the predictive engine offline? Why is the rollout paused?" Followed by, "Are we in some kind of legal issue we should know about?" Yup, they were. Legal ordered all features tied to the disputed architecture to be temporarily disabled until IP clarity is restored. That meant half of Delta 2.0, the parts that ran client analytics, the parts that drove billing logic, the parts that justified the upsell. Suddenly, the team that once bragged about speed to iteration was caught in a full lockdown. Every build flagged, every push request frozen. They weren't sprinting anymore. They were buried in compliance quicksand, and I was the one who loosened the soil. Then came the real gem, the one they really hadn't seen coming. Buried deep in their Series B funding contract, like 6 layers of fine print deep, was a clause. A beautiful, devastating sentence. In the event of an unresolved material IP dispute affecting core product function, investor funding obligations are subject to suspension until legal resolution. I hadn't written it, but I'd read it months ago. during a weekend where I was trying to understand how they'd structured their financing. Back when I still hoped I'd eventually get a seat at the real table. And now, that clause was a ticking bomb. Because what investor, in their right mind, was going to keep wiring funds to a company actively using contested IP without a clear legal title to it? Spoiler: none. The moment that clause got triggered, the faucet turned off. Incoming capital, frozen. Payroll bonuses, deferred. Feature investments, canceled. They couldn't even legally promise functionality on upcoming contracts because anything built on Delta's bones was now radioactive. I wasn't just some disgruntled dev anymore. It was a legal sinkhole they were rapidly sliding into, while smiling through their teeth at quarterly check-ins and praying no one asked any hard questions. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't raged. I hadn't sent a single angry email. All I did was file what was mine. And now, they couldn't move without stepping on me. Funny how quiet revenge looks when it's notarized. They called it an alignment session, which was rich, considering no one in the room could align on anything more complex than their own coffee orders. Emergency Zoom. Friday morning. Cameras on. Faces tight. The mood, somewhere between funeral and public execution, except no one had told them who the body was yet. The investors were there, 4 tiles in stiff suits, eyes like ice picks. Their counsel took lead, a woman with a voice sharp enough to sterilize surgical equipment. She didn't waste time. No greetings, no small talk. Before we move forward, she said, flipping through a manila folder with surgical grace, we need to confirm something simple. Click. She held up the signed termination letter on screen. My name, bold and final, their cause for dismissal, the date, the signatures. Who, she asked, voice calm and deadly, authorized this termination? Silence, a long one. Then HR jumped first, of course they did. That came from legal, the director chirped, eyes darting like a trapped possum. We were told there were compliance risks. We were simply following protocol. Legal's head of risk shot a look across the screen like she'd just been accused of arson. That's not accurate, he said. Flat, cold. We were notified after the fact. We were not included in any IP review and certainly not in the decision to terminate. No counsel was requested. No waivers were filed. Investor counsel didn't react, just jotted something down, then looked at the founder. Now, this guy, he'd spent months acting like Delta 2.0 was his personal moon landing. He loved to talk vision. He loved even more to talk over people. But right now, he looked like a child caught stealing batteries from a Walgreens. He cleared his throat. Twice. There may have been a miscommunication about escalation. No, the investor lawyer interrupted. What you have here is a failure of corporate governance. You terminated an individual whose intellectual property formed the backbone of your platform. You did so without legal oversight, without verifying assignment agreements, and without securing ownership. A beat. And now you've breached Clause 17C. The funding hold remains in place. That was when the senior engineer, Michael, of all people, spoke. He'd been there nearly as long as I had. We didn't talk much. He was one of the few people I trusted not to break the system when touching it. Solid dev. Liked to build, didn't like drama. He unmuted, his camera shaky like he was dialing in from a stairwell. I can't be part of this anymore, he said. I reviewed the Delta code last night. 90% of it ties back to her original commits. This whole thing was built on her logic. Dead silence. I'm resigning, he added. Effective immediately. I'll forward my offboarding doc. I'm not going down with this. Click. He left the call. No one breathed for a full 5 seconds. Then someone, the CFO maybe, started muttering about internal reviews and learning opportunities. But it was over. Everyone knew. You could see it in their eyes. The crumbling edges. The quiet calculations. This wasn't salvageable. They didn't just burn a bridge. They torched the foundation and tried to sell the ashes. And now, flames were in their inboxes. They tried to spin it one last time. One more carefully worded press release. One more line about strategic restructuring and technical roadmaps being revisited. The kind of corporate airbrushing that's supposed to trick people into thinking an implosion is just a rebrand. But behind the scenes, the walls were bleeding. The final shareholder call wasn't a discussion. It was a reckoning. Closed door, off camera. Attendance mandatory. Everyone's mic muted except the lead investor and legal counsel. The statement was read in a tone devoid of oxygen. Due to pending IP disputes and unresolved ownership claims tied to the Delta framework, Product Delta is officially suspended until further legal clarity is achieved. No questions, no follow-up, just silence, the kind that chokes. Within hours, the lead investor pulled out. A clean break. Public, blunt, merciless. In light of material governance failures, our partnership with company name is concluded. The valuation cratered. Word spread fast. Clients paused contracts. The hiring pipeline froze. Engineers started scrubbing the company name from their LinkedIn profiles like it was mold. The founder's name became radioactive in pitch decks and VC circles. They didn't just lose a product, they lost credibility, all because someone signed a termination letter they didn't understand. Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, I sat a window seat in a co-working space with chipped white tables and decent tea. No screens, no noise, just my laptop, a ceramic mug, and a manila folder sitting next to me. Stamped on the front in black ink, LLC Approval Architect Systems inside, my articles of incorporation, my new domain, my own damn Slack workspace. I'd already onboarded 2 contractors, former coworkers, people who'd watched the circus from the inside and asked, quietly, if I had room for them on whatever came next. And I did, because now there was a next. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't glory. It wasn't about showing them up or rubbing it in. It was ownership. And then, as if the universe had a sense of timing, my phone buzzed. An email. Subject, potential collaboration opportunity sender. One of the junior partners at the same investment firm that had just torched my old employer. They didn't even pretend to beat around the bush. We understand you're the registered holder of the foundational IP behind the Delta architecture. We'd like to explore working with you directly, clean slate, clean paper. No legacy baggage. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled. Because in the end, they always come back. Not for the brand, not for the execs, not for the logo, but for the mind that built the damn thing in the first place. And this time, that mind had her name on everything. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.